Well, I have to say Grundy's were wonderful with me, you know, because they used to allow me to come in, do a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, and then I'd get a play or a film, and I'd go to them and I'd say, in, 4 months' time, I've got this play coming up. Is there anything you can do to write me up? And they were fantastic to me. They used to write me a story that sent me to Barnhurst, and I think that kept me really fresh all the time, so that every time I went out, I'd be doing, a completely different character. I'd come back and it was like meeting an old friend, picking up Chrissie again. So I don't regret that I wasn't in there longer. I think I actually lost a job because they said I was so identified as Chrissie Latham. It was a film that was being made in South Australia, and I got into the last 3, and they said, Amanda, they've said no to you because you are so recognised as Chrissie Latham. So I think, I think it was really lucky that I got the chance to go in and out. And when I left, I went straight into into steaming, I think it was, which again kind of rocketed me to fame in the theatre world. And so I didn't have any regrets. It was a choice that I made. And I think it also left me feeling wonderful about the work that I had done and the friends that I'd made. They've been friends for life, and it's been good. Otherwise, I think if you stay in there too long, you end up hating each other, or you can do in some things, and that never happened to me. I always got on well with everybody, and it was good fun. I bullied my way into the audition, as some of you may have heard on another commentary that I did. I bullied my way in because I couldn't get an audition, so I just turned up and walked in on the off chance. And Ian Bradley, who was the producer, took one look at me and he said, oh, well, you could play Marilyn. Marilyn was kind of the sex pot, red lips, long blonde hair, long legs. And so I auditioned for that, and at the end of it he said, no, you're not quite right for Marilyn, but there is this other role. And he asked me to read for Chrissie Latham. But of course the first one I read for was Marilyn, who had the affair with the electrician. I was a bit disappointed that I didn't get that. Little did I know I was going to have affairs with everyone and everything by the time I left the series. Well, I think the storylines that Chrissie got all the way through the 3 or 4 years that I was in it, they were all fantastic. I mean, I ran the gamut of emotions. I was either crying or bashing people up or being bashed up. I was often very funny. I was sexy. These were I'm not saying I'm sexy, I'm saying that the way it was written, with my short skirt and those wonderful yellow shoes that I used to wear. But, me, Amanda, I would have loved to have played like a more ingenue character, in that, the kind of heroine. Chrissie never really got a go at being a heroine or being the vulnerable, although she was incredibly vulnerable too. Wherever Elizabeth was concerned, that was her vulnerability. But before I had the baby in prison, I wasn't vulnerable at all. And I used to look at all the other characters, like, Peter DePano's character and Wonky Warner, who was Kerry Armstrong. They all had these wonderful kind of, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. But I never had a chance to say it wasn't me, because it always was me. But so I would have liked a bit more of that to go on. But generally, I was thrilled when my storylines came through. I loved it. You never knew what was going to come next. And it was like a lolly shop every time the script was delivered on the Friday. You'd go home at the weekend and go, yes, I've got this brilliant thing that I'm going to be doing next week. And And whenever it was a good story, you learnt it in seconds, you know, because by then you knew your characters so well. I think one of the, I don't know if I should tell this story, one of the funniest things that ever happened, and also awful things, was that there was a character in it called Jude Curing. And on a take, she was quite mad. She was a wonderful actress. And on a take, she came down the corridor and she had 2 tampons hanging out of her nose with the strings hanging down. I mean, you know, when you're younger, things like that just absolutely send you up rotten, and nobody was expecting it. But other things that used to make us laugh were the walls wobbling, of course, and then of course in the early days, I think they stopped it later, but in the early days we all had to smoke, and of course I don't smoke, so I became the laughing stock of all the other women who were mostly, I mean, of course Sheila Florence, who was Lizzie, she smoked, Val Lehman, B. Smith, you know, she smoked. Judith McGrath, Elspeth Ballantyne. I don't remember anyone who didn't smoke except me. Oh, Julianne Newbold didn't smoke, and Archie Whiteley smoked, Ziggy Thornton smoked. So of course they all had to make me smoke. So I had to have a bucket on the side of the set, because every time I smoked, I did it as real as I could and actually took it down and was vomiting. So they all had a laugh at my expense, but I suppose it was funny, really. Another time in a fight scene, I ended up with my, you know, legs up in the air and knickers showing and all the rest of it, so they had to cut that one out. But, you know, hysterical things used to happen all the time, especially with lines going wrong. I think anyone who is incarcerated must have a terrible time of it, no matter what they've done. And of course, the people that I met, they were mini crims, if you like. You know, we didn't meet any murderers or violent people. They were in for kind of petty crimes. But I did feel sorry for them, a lot of them, because their backgrounds were very sad. And I think the research that was done on Prisoner, on all our characters, was remarkable, because we did all have backgrounds. You know, it wasn't like when you other soap operas that were done at that time, your characters just came out of nowhere. But we did have backgrounds to hang on to. You know, I did come from a very working class, poor family with brothers and sisters, and the mother was dead, and I was brought up by my father, and you know, she was abused as a child, and then as a woman, which is what turned her to prostitution. And I would say most of the young girls I met in reform school, they all had horrid stories of abuse. And so I never take people on face value now. If I hear someone's been a heroin addict or they've been in prison, I don't prejudge them. I always know that there is a very good reason why they are there, that isn't always their fault. I mean, obviously there are some people who are born bad and born evil, but I think generally bad luck happens to a lot of people. So I think we have to be very tolerant of what happens to everybody in this world. You know, we're all here to try and get on, and some people are luckier than others. Oh, hello, Tiggs. This is your question, isn't it? From, is it on the inside? Right, hello. I assume that's a club in England or here, I don't know. But hello. Yeah, I loved her. And I think she was really very, very real, in that she would defend herself, but if it was to the detriment of her child, she wouldn't. She'd give her life for the child, which I think, you know, most women would for their babies. And as I said before, I just ran the gamut of every... I got a chance to sing in Prisoner, I got a chance to dance, to dress up, to wear no makeup, to wear makeup, to be nude in the showers. I mean, they just, you know, it was just great fun. And I had great joy in playing her, and I have no regrets. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I wish I didn't do that. In fact, there's quite a few people that did Prisoner and they don't ever admit it. I was in a show once with someone and a fan came up and they said to her, you know, weren't you so-and-so? She was one of the screws. She was only in for a little while, but she denied it. And I looked at her and I thought, why? Why would you deny something that you've done, you know, that you should be proud of? But, you know, some people are funny. And, you know, sometimes there's been a stigma attached to actors who do soap operas. I don't know why, because it's the hardest work, and you have to think on your feet when things go wrong, because there isn't time to often do another take. And it's a great way to learn the industry and build your craft as an actor on television. But I loved playing Chrissie, and I you know, the fans that have written to me over the years, I have loved all of your letters, and so it indicates that you love her too. But she did make lots of mistakes and was very silly. Sometimes you wanted to get hold of her and go, stop it, don't do that, you know, because she'd get it wrong again. She was pathetic, but loving and charming in some lights, and very naughty in other lights. So I loved it. I think Chrissie was a fantastic mother. I think where Elizabeth was concerned, she'd have sold her soul. And she certainly sold the soul of many other people that were in Prisoner at the time, including people like Ziggy Thornton, who escaped once, and she came to me for advice, silly girl, and said, you know, what would you do if you know, got out? And so I told her, go down to the wharfs, I said, pick up a sailor, get on a boat and get out of here as quickly as you can. And then, of course, the police came in and all the governor and everything saying, anybody who will give any information about, I can't remember Ziggy Thornton's character, isn't that awful? But anyone who would give any information would get a remission. Well, immediately Chrissie thought, oh, I can get out and see my baby, but what about my baby, B? But B, what about my baby? And so she dobbed Ziggy Thornton in. I can remember another time when my dear mate now, Julianne Newbold's character, Hannah, she was getting set up by B. The whole prison was trying to get rid of the freak. And so they were trying to make it look like the freak was having an affair with Julianne's character, Hannah Simpson, was it? And so, of course, I'm in on the whole thing. And at one point, the freak gets me alone in my cell and says, Latham, if you don't tell us what's going on here, because the freak, being the freak, knew that something was up. And she says, if you don't tell me what's going on, I'll stop you seeing your baby. Immediately, Chrissie comes out with, oh, well, B's trying to set you up to make it look like you want to have an affair with Hannah. And end of story, but it's all to do with Elizabeth. Right, how do I think Elizabeth would have grown up? Well, when you think, which you may know or you may not know, when I first gave birth to Elizabeth, it was a boy that you saw on camera, because the producer, Ian Bradley, his wife had just given birth to Luke. And he was this big and he was adorable. And so we used Luke in those first shots of the baby. So baby Elizabeth actually started out as a little boy. So she could have turned into anything by the time she was a teenager. Now I'm being silly. I would have hoped that by the time Chrissie got a bit older, that she would have seen sense about what she was doing with her life and what she had done with her life, i.e. killed the doctor with a pair of scissors and really got all her money from prostitution. I don't think any mother would want their daughter to go into prostitution, and certainly not murder. And I would have hoped that she would have pulled herself together when she eventually did get out, if she got out. I mean, I don't know how long I would have got for murder. Life, I would think. But I'm sure that Chrissie would never have wanted that for Elizabeth. And I think, I'd like to think that Elizabeth would have grown up to be very, very different, not a prostitute, had had a better education than Chrissie ever got, and who knows, maybe she grew up to be a doctor, seeing as I'd killed one in the prison. I don't know. I just dropped the microphone. Well, Jason, thank you for your lovely comments. I think as an actor, you've got to really keep yourself fit. So I walk every day. I have a dog, so I walk the dog every day, every morning. I get up early, seize the day, and if I can, I take him for another walk in the afternoon. I'm someone who's danced all my life, so I love dancing, whether it's in a musical, because, you know, when I'm not doing Prisoner, I've been doing a lot of musicals. I love massage. I have a personal massage every week. This fantastic masseur comes to my own home every week, so after the massage I can just really relax. I do Pilates. I belong to a gymnasium. I try and have facials as often as I can. I love having my feet done. I just think, you know, you've got to look after yourself, and it gets harder as you get older. So you've got to just, you know, keep in. I eat the right things, I try to anyway. But otherwise, you know, if you don't look any good, you don't get the work. I'm not saying that I look good, I'm just saying I'm trying to look good. Hello, Robert Ivory. No, I didn't ever have an input because I didn't get to know the writers as much as the other women who were in there all the time. I know that Val Lehman used to get into the ears of the writers, and good on her. I did towards the end, I remember, because I think Grundy started to realise that it was important that as the actors, you know, we got to know the people who were writing for us. And I think, you know, one of our favourite writers was Denise Morgan, and she would always listen, and she'd tell you what they were thinking of doing with you, and that in turn gave you ideas. But I would have loved to have had a bigger input. And as for ad-libbing, yes, I did that a lot, because I played Chrissie as a Cockney, and the scripts were never written like a Cockney. They were written like an Australian, and so I used to put little extras in to make her sound English, like, you know, do you know what I mean? And so I said to her, I said, and he said to me, he said, and all those things. So, yeah, and of course Grundy's loved me doing that, because it made for a different character and an English character, which was completely possible in Australia, because it's full of people from all over the world. What was really difficult is that because we did have so many different writers writing for us, sometimes a script would come in and you just go, no, that is so wrong. She wouldn't do that. Please don't make me do that. And in turn, we were working with different directors every week. So these new directors every week, they wanted their episode to be terrific and the best, and often there happened like a contradiction between what we wanted to do as actors and what the writer had written, who might have just come in and not known the background of all our characters. And then you had a new director who also didn't know what you'd been doing weeks before or months before or even years before, and everybody wanted to be a chief. And sometimes that became really hard, but often we as actors were allowed to win, because Val was fantastic, Val Lehman. She would ring the producers in you know, and just say, look, there's something going on here that's not right, we wouldn't do this, and often the word would come down. She was the best top dog in every way, you know, she was great. Well, John Doherty, your question about was I always supposed to be in there, the answer is no, because I was only ever meant to be in prison for 2 weeks. They wanted someone to come in, fall in love with the prison doctor, and when he didn't return my affection, for me to kill him, stab him with a pair of scissors. And of course he was the husband of Meg, who ended up, you know, being one of my best friends later on in the series. I don't mean friends in life, of course we're friends in life too, but in the series, you know, how could she befriend someone who killed her husband? But that's Prisoner for you. And what did happen after the 2 weeks, they were inundated with letters saying, you know, bring back that character, the one in the short skirt and the red lips and the blonde hair, the one who's a bit cockney, we like her. And so it was great, they brought me back in, but I had to wait, I think it was like 16 weeks or something before they could put me back in, because they'd already got that many in the can. And I was thrilled to be asked back and have so many wonderful storylines. Hello, Matt Derby. Thank you for your question. Without any hesitation, B. Smith was the best top dog, and also I have to say that she was the one that I was in prison with in all of the time that I was there. Val Lehman played B. Smith so brilliantly. She had humility, she had patience, she had guts. She was always taking risks. She played a great, when she had to be violent, it was really scary. And yet she could be so kind as well, B. Smith. And it's so weird when I look at the way we started in our relationship and the way we ended. You know, I was really pally with B. Smith in the end, and she with me. As for the governor, Gerda Nicholson, was in it for such a not as long as Patsy King. You can't really, I can't really differentiate between the two. They were both really, they were great. But Patsy always used to have her hair just so. If there was a hair out of place, she couldn't stand it. And she used to have beautiful hands. Always used to look after her hands beautifully and spoke beautifully. And Gerda was really into Tai Chi. You'd find her. Gerda Nicholson was the other governor called Anne Reynolds. And darling Gerda, she died very sadly, but she used to do Tai Chi on the set. She used to go into the set almost in the dark when there was no one in there, and you'd see her doing all this wonderful Tai Chi, and she was really centered and controlled and did a lot of meditation. And very sadly, she died of cancer, I believe, or leukemia, something terrible. She was a lovely, lovely lady. Hello, Kenny Brooklyn. Yes, we always did our own stunts. In fact, in the early days, we didn't even have a fight coordinator. And I'll never forget, you know, all the riot scenes that we did when Frankie Doyle was in the studio, and we had massive scenes where we were all fighting, and it was an absolute free-for-all. And I actually had my nose fractured by Val Lehman, complete accident. She just caught me with the end of her elbow, and there was blood and everything. It was very dramatic. They had to call the sister down from the first aid, and I was going into supermarkets doing my shopping, and people were saying, great acting last night with all that blood. How do they do that blood, they said, and of course it was real, because she just caught me on that part of the nose that it just went, it was great. But thank goodness we did have, eventually we had fight coordinators come in, because it just got too dangerous with pulling things off walls, you know, like shelves with books on it, and throwing chairs. And I remember that scene that Frankie Doyle did, Carol Burns, where she just had to go mad in the room, and she just, hell for leather, just threw everything around. But she was in there on her own. But when it was all of us, it was very scary. Luke Page, if they ever did Prisoner again, if it was even a one-off, I would love to revisit Chrissie Latham, especially as the age I am now, and with the experience I've now got as an actor. You know, when I've been looking back these last few weeks at how young we all were, and how I look at myself sometimes and cringe. I just feel so inexperienced, and I was in the early days. And then, you know, by the time I was leaving, I almost got it right. But I'd love a chance to do it again. When Prisoner first came along, it was one of the first opportunities that the public got to really believe that something was real, because they were all such good actors in Prisoner. We made it look and feel very real. And I think it's time that we did another prison theme. I mean, look how popular Prison Break is, and we still love to look, don't we, into places where we can never go. Wayne George, you can never beat the original. If you mean remake the original series, i.e. use all the same scripts with different actors, I think no, it wouldn't work at all, because, you know, we've all moved on. I'm not talking about I'm talking about the world has moved on. The scripts would be very different nowadays to what we were allowed to do back then and what we're allowed to get away with now. Yeah, I would only think that it could work is if you did bring back all the original cast, and took it from where they are now, what's happened to them in the last 25 years. That would be funny, wouldn't it? Funny, amazing, sad, because we've lost some of them, and I think well worth doing. I think we should do it.